They called her worthless. They called her broken. But what they never expected was that the most powerful alpha in the world would rise for her. The hall is alive with cruel laughter. 1,000 eyes flicker like hungry flames as the Omegas are paraded across the stage one by one, each girl trembling under the scrutiny of powerful alphas seated in golden thrones. The auctioneer's booming voice echoes off the marble walls, calling out bloodlines, beauty and strength, as if these women were nothing more than livestock to be sold. Bids roar through the chamber, coins clatter, prideful smirks twist across the faces of alphas who win their chosen Omegas like trophies, and then silence. At the end of the line, a girl steps forward, fragile, thin, her eyes downcast, her dress little more than rags compared to the silks of the others. She doesn't carry herself with defiance or grace, only with the heavy shadow of rejection that has followed her all her life. The whispers begin. That one? She's useless. Not even worth a single coin. No alpha would waste his claim on her. Some laugh outright, mocking her trembling hands. Others sneer and look away, disgusted. The auctioneer clears his throat awkwardly, trying to salvage dignity in a moment drowning in scorn. "Who will start the bidding?" he calls. But no one speaks. Not a single hand rises. The humiliation stretches like an open wound. Heat rushes to her face as she realizes she is standing alone, unwanted, while the laughter grows louder and sharper around her. It isn't just rejection. It is annihilation of her worth. Tears blur her vision, but she doesn't let them fall. Not here. Not in front of them. The auctioneer tries again, his voice cracking with strain. Surely someone will offer... More laughter, more jeers, more whispers of pathetic and reject. And then the floor trembles. Every alpha in the hall falls silent as a chair scrapes back. Heavy boots echo against the marble. A commanding presence rises from the highest seat, cloaked in shadow, yet radiating authority so fierce that no one dares breathe. The Alpha King. His golden eyes pierce through the crowd like molten fire. His aura is crushing, his dominance undeniable. And to the shock of all, his gaze fixes on her. The girl everyone mocked. The Omega no one wanted. He raises his hand, voice deep and steady. "She is mine." Gasps ripple through the hall. Courtiers exchange frantic whispers. Alphas stare in disbelief. Why would the king himself, feared, revered, untouchable, claim the weakest, most despised Omega? But he doesn't wait for their approval. His word is law, his decision final. The girl blinks in shock, her heart hammering. For the first time she feels the weight of silence, not from scorn but from awe. And yet she cannot understand. Why him? Why me? The laughter is gone. The hall bows to its king. And the auction of shame ends with a revelation that will change everything. If you're gripped by this story already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss the next episode. This is only the beginning. The echo of the king's claim still hung in the air like thunder after a storm. She is mine. Those words had silenced the hall, had silenced the jeers, but they had not silenced the fear pounding in her chest. The girl, the unwanted, rejected Omega, was dragged from the stage, not with respect, but with rough, calloused hands. The guards did not see her as chosen. They saw her as a burden the king in his strange whim had placed upon them. The crowd's whispers followed her all the way to the gilded carriage that awaited outside. The king has lost his senses. He shames the throne with an Omega like her. What curse has he invited into the palace? She kept her head down, each step heavy, her body trembling with a storm of disbelief. She should have felt relief. She had not been discarded. She had not been left to rot. But this did not feel like rescue. It felt like being taken from one prison into another. The palace was nothing like the halls of the auction. Where the auction had been cruel, noisy, dripping with gold and mockery, the palace was quiet. Quiet like a blade pressed against the throat. Its marble pillars gleamed, its tapestries stretched high with depictions of battles won by kings before him. Everywhere she turned, eyes followed her, but not with admiration, with disgust. The courtiers sneered openly. Their whispers were not hushed. An Omega here. Does he mean to crown her queen? She will taint the throne with her weakness. The princesses were worse. Daughters of dukes and lords, noble-blooded and draped in silks, they had all dreamed of becoming the Alpha King's bride. To them, she was not just beneath their notice, she was their insult, their enemy. One spat at the floor as she passed. Another deliberately brushed against her shoulder, hissing into her ear. "You won't last a week." Even the servants joined the cruelty. They shoved her when no one looked, poured dirty water into her wash basin, left her food cold. They called her the king's charity case, mocking the very air she breathed. And the king. The king was a shadow. He did not call for her. He did not speak to her. He did not touch her. He simply existed somewhere above her, watching, silent, unreadable. She could feel his eyes on her sometimes in the great hall, heavy and golden. But when she looked up, his gaze had already turned away. Was she nothing more than a whim, a pawn to him, a distraction? Her heart twisted every time she saw the courtiers laugh, every time a princess brushed against him with false sweetness, every time she caught her reflection in the palace mirrors and saw only the broken Omega everyone had mocked. The breaking point came one night. She had been given a chamber, not the grand quarters of a queen, but a small cold room at the farthest end of the palace. Her thin dress clung to her as she knelt on the stone floor, her fists pressed against her eyes to stop the tears. But she could not stop them, not anymore. The weight of shame, the endless whispers, the cruelty that followed her like a curse. It all crashed down at once. "I don't belong here," she whispered to herself, voice breaking. "I never should have come. I never should have been born." Her sobs echoed in the silence of the room. For once, she let herself fall apart, shoulders shaking, breath uneven, the taste of salt burning her lips. And then she felt it. A shift in the air, heavy, electric. The kind of presence that made the skin prickle, the kind of silence that was sharper than any blade. She froze, lifting her head slowly. In the shadows of her chamber stood a figure, tall, broad, cloaked in darkness but unmistakable. His golden eyes burned like fire in the night. The Alpha King. Her breath caught. She wanted to rise, to bow, to hide her tear-stained face. But she could not move. For a moment, he only watched her, his expression unreadable, his jaw like carved stone, his aura filling the room until she could barely breathe. And then, his voice broke the silence. Deep, low, commanding. "You are mine now, and no one will touch you." The words struck her like a thunderclap. They were not tender. They were not soft. But they were absolute. A promise, a warning, a command. Her tears stilled, confusion and fear warring in her chest. Did he mean to protect her, or to claim her like a possession no different than the cold marble of the palace floors? He stepped closer, the scent of power and danger clinging to him, until she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. He reached out, not to touch her cheek, not to wipe her tears, but to lift her chin with a single finger, forcing her to meet his gaze. Those golden eyes seared into her soul. She had never seen such dominance, such fire, such loneliness. And then, just as suddenly, he dropped his hand and stepped back into the shadows. The door closed, and she was left, trembling, her heart no longer breaking, but burning with a new, terrifying question. Why does the Alpha King care for me at all? Sleep would not come. Not after the king's words. "You are mine now, and no one will touch you." The sound of his voice still echoed in her chest, heavy and unshakable. She lay in her small chamber, staring at the ceiling, wondering whether those words had been a promise of safety or a chain of ownership. In the palace, every morning began the same, with stares like daggers, with whispers that curled like smoke in her ears. "The Omega has bewitched him." No, she is cursed. Why else would he choose her? Perhaps it is punishment for us all. The courtiers never spoke kindly. The princesses never softened their hatred. Even the servants mocked her quietly as she passed, their laughter trailing her like shadows. But sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she caught a glimpse of him. The Alpha King. Standing at the far end of the great hall, his broad shoulders cloaked in black, golden eyes unreadable. He did not speak to her. He did not summon her. But his gaze lingered. Too long. Too heavy. Like a secret she was not yet meant to understand. And then the whispers began. Not about her, but about him. Late one night, while carrying a tray of bread and wine the servants had spitefully left her to deliver alone, she paused outside a chamber when she heard her name. Two noblewomen whispered furiously within. "Why her?" one hissed. "Because of the prophecy," the other answered. "You've heard it. The cursed bond, the rejected one. The Omega no one wanted. She is said to carry the bloodline that could either doom the throne or save it." Her hand trembled, nearly spilling the wine. "If the prophecy is true," the first woman whispered, "then she is not a mistake. She is destiny. But destiny is dangerous. If she remains at his side, it will mean ruin for us all." The second woman's voice dropped to a deadly hush. "Then perhaps she should not remain alive long enough for destiny to choose." A sharp gasp escaped her before she could stop it. The tray rattled in her hands. Inside, the whispers cut off abruptly. She ran. Her feet pounded the stone halls, heart hammering, fear clawing at her throat. When she reached her chamber, she bolted the door and pressed her back against it, her breath coming fast and shallow. A prophecy? A cursed bond? Her bloodline? None of it made sense. She had been nothing all her life. Nothing but a rejected Omega, mocked and forgotten. How could her blood matter? How could she be dangerous to anyone? And yet, she had heard the venom in their voices. The threat was real. The days that followed blurred into a haze of fear and confusion. She could feel it now, the way people moved differently when she passed, the way conversations stopped the moment she entered a room, the way their eyes lingered, sharp and calculating. And still, the king said nothing. He watched. He measured. He remained untouchable. Until one night. She sat curled by the window in her chamber, staring out at the vast gardens below, lit silver by the moon. Her hands twisted in her lap, restless, trembling. She had not eaten. She could not sleep. The prophecy, the whispers, the threat. Should I run? She thought desperately. Should I escape this place before they kill me? Before I become a pawn in some game I do not understand? And then the air shifted. She knew that feeling now. Heavy, commanding, like the very shadows had bent to obey. Her head whipped around. He was there. The Alpha King stood in her doorway, silent, golden eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. Her breath caught. She wanted to speak, to ask why he had chosen her, to demand answers about the prophecy, to beg for truth. But the words tangled in her throat. He stepped into the room, his presence filling it, his silence louder than thunder. For a long moment, he only looked at her, and then in a voice low and steady he spoke. "You've heard them, haven't you? The whispers." Her blood ran cold. They speak of prophecies they do not understand. They speak of curses they cannot control. But listen to me. His gaze locked on hers, hard and unrelenting. "They will not touch you, not while I breathe." Tears stung her eyes. Anger rose in her chest. Fear warred with something far more dangerous, the strange aching pull she felt every time he looked at her. "Why?" she finally whispered, her voice breaking. "Why me? Why choose me when you could have had any of them?" The silence that followed stretched like an eternity. His jaw clenched, his eyes burned. He took one step closer, then another, until she could feel the heat of him just a breath away. His answer came like a storm breaking. "Because destiny does not ask, it demands." She stared at him, heart racing, mind spinning. Prophecy, destiny, a cursed bond, and a deadly plot against her life. One truth became clear in that moment: her world would never be the same again. But what terrified her more than death itself was that a part of her was beginning to believe him. The king's words still echoed in her chest. Because destiny does not ask, it demands. She barely had time to grasp them, to steady her breathing beneath the weight of that revelation, before the world shifted again. It began with a sound, a creak in the corridor, too sharp, too deliberate. Her heart lurched. The king's head snapped toward the door, his golden eyes narrowing. In the next breath, the chamber exploded into chaos. Shadows poured in, figures cloaked in black, knives flashing under the pale moonlight, assassins. The prophecy had found its teeth. She stumbled backward, a cry caught in her throat. One of the intruders lunged at her, blade glinting. Before steel could meet flesh, a roar shattered the air, low, primal, earth-shaking. The Alpha King moved, not like a man, not like any warrior she had ever seen. His body twisted, bones cracking, skin rippling as the beast within him surged forth. His eyes burned brighter, molten gold, his canines lengthening, claws tearing through the air. The feral wolf. The sight stole her breath. He struck like lightning, ripping through the first assassin with a swipe that sent the man sprawling. The others hesitated, trembling under the force of his dominance. But desperation drove them forward. "Kill her," one hissed. They came at her again. She pressed against the wall, frozen, terror crushing her chest, until the king stood between them, a living wall of fury. He was no longer the silent, unreadable monarch. He was raw power, unleashed. Blades cut the air. He caught them with his bare hands, claws slicing through steel like it was nothing. Blood-sprayed screams echoed, the chamber filled with the sound of violence, and then a sharp pain. She gasped as one assassin slipped past his guard, slashing across her side. Fire ripped through her body. She staggered, collapsing to the floor, her vision swimming red. "No," she whispered, her hand pressing against the wound. The king's roar shook the palace to its core. He turned, eyes blazing with feral rage. The last assassin never had a chance. His body hit the ground before she could even blink. Silence fell. Her breathing came ragged, shallow, the cold stone biting into her skin. She felt herself slipping, the world tilting. But then warmth. He was there. The Alpha King knelt beside her, his claws retracting, his monstrous aura folding back into the man she had first seen. But his eyes, they still burned, fierce and unrelenting. His hand pressed over her wound. She flinched, then gasped. Heat spread through her body. Not the heat of blood, but something deeper, stronger. His touch seared, yet it soothed. Her skin knit beneath his palm, her torn flesh stitching back together as if the wound had never been. A mark flared to life against her skin, a golden glow pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat, her bond. Her breath caught, her eyes widened. She could feel him, his strength, his fury, his loneliness, his claim. It surged into her veins, tying her to him in a way no words could explain. When he pulled his hand back, the wound was gone. But the glow remained, faint, luminous, alive. Her body trembled, her lips parted, but no words came. What have you done to me?" she whispered. His gaze locked onto hers, sharp as a blade. "What was always meant to be," he answered. The aftermath came quickly. Guards rushed into the chamber, their faces pale with fear at the sight of the slain assassins. Courtiers soon followed, their whispers rising like a storm. They saw the blood. They saw the glow. They saw the mark that bound her to him, and the fury erupted. Impossible. She carries his bond. An Omega, a rejected one? Unthinkable. Blasphemy, the nobles shouted, their faces twisted with rage. Princesses wept, shrieked, hurled accusations. The council demanded answers. But the king stood tall, unyielding, his presence silencing the hall. He pulled her forward, his hand firm on her shoulder, his golden eyes daring any to challenge him. "She carries my mark. She is under my protection, under my claim. And if any of you dare to defy me..." His voice dropped, low and deadly. You defy the throne itself. The court fell into stunned silence, but silence did not mean peace. That night the whispers grew darker. If she becomes queen, the kingdom will fall. We must separate them before the bond strengthens. War will be better than allowing this insult to endure. The rejected Omega, the girl no one had wanted, no one had claimed, now bore the mark of the Alpha King, and the kingdom would rather burn than bow to her. She lay in her chamber later that night, staring at the glowing mark faintly pulsing on her skin. She could still feel him, his heartbeat, his strength, his presence, like a thread tying her soul to his. Tears stung her eyes, though she did not know if they were born of fear or of something far more dangerous. Because for the first time she realized the truth. She was no longer invisible. She was no longer forgotten. She was bound to the most powerful man alive, and the whole world was preparing to tear her away from him. The mark still glowed faintly on her skin. She traced it with trembling fingers, feeling the thrum of power beneath her flesh. It was his, the Alpha King's, his claim, his bond, his protection. And yet, as the days passed, the mark began to feel less like protection and more like a chain. The court's hatred had only deepened. Nobles spat her name like poison, servants hissed in corners, and princesses wept as though the world itself had ended. Still, the king stood by her, silent, steady, fierce in his defense. His presence was her shield, his word her only anchor, but a shield is not the same as trust. She wanted to believe in him. She wanted to believe his whispers in the shadows, his promise that no one would touch her. But her heart still remembered the years of cruelty, the nights of loneliness, the auction where she had been mocked and left to rot. And then came the night of betrayal. It was a whisper at first, a passing servant who didn't see her in the alcove murmuring to another. He hides her true bloodline. The king has always known. The words struck her like a knife. She froze, her breath lodged in her chest. Another servant laughed quietly. Of course. Why else would he claim her so boldly? She carries the blood of the ancient line, dangerous blood. He hides it until he can bind her fully, until she is too deep in his grasp to run. Her pulse quickened. She stumbled back, her mind spinning. The prophecy, the whispers, the cursed bond. Had he known all along? That night, she confronted him. He stood on the balcony, moonlight painting his sharp features in silver. His golden eyes glowed as if they had been waiting for her. "Tell me it's not true," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Tell me you didn't know." His silence was her answer. Her chest tightened, tears burning her eyes. "You knew who I was. You knew what I carried. You knew. And you said nothing." Finally he turned. His expression was unreadable, carved in stone. "I did what I had to do." Her voice broke. "You lied to me." "I protected you," he growled, but there was no softness in the words, only power, only control. She shook her head, stepping back, her heart shattering with every breath. "No. You claimed me because of the prophecy, because of my blood, not because of me." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing, and that silence cut deeper than any blade. She fled. Her bare feet slapped against the cold marble floors, her tears blurring the torches that lit the palace corridors. The guards called after her, but she ran faster, through the gates into the forest beyond. The night swallowed her whole. Branches tore at her skin, roots clawed at her feet, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. Her chest ached with betrayal, her lungs burned with grief, and still she ran. "He never wanted me. He only wanted what I carried." The words echoed inside her until she could barely breathe. But destiny is a cruel hunter, and she would not run far. Shadows emerged in the trees, figures cloaked in black, familiar laughter curling through the dark. Her stomach dropped as she recognized their voices, the alphas and nobles who had mocked her at the auction. "Well, well," one sneered, stepping forward. "The king's little Omega has run away." Another chuckled, his eyes gleaming with cruel delight. How fitting. A rejected thing returns to where she belongs, at the mercy of men who see her for what she truly is. They circled her, blades flashing, eyes glinting. She stumbled back, her body trembling, her breath shallow. She had no king here, no protection, no bond to shield her, only herself. The first strike came fast, a blade slashing toward her arm. She dodged, but pain seared her skin as the steel grazed her. She cried out, stumbling, clutching the wound. They laughed. "You're weak," one hissed, just like at the auction. "Worthless." Another shoved her to the ground, her palms scraped against the dirt. She lifted her head, tears mixing with blood, the world spinning around her. She was cornered, alone, broken. But then, something shifted. Not around her, within her. The mark on her skin pulsed, faint but alive. The bond hummed in her veins, whispering strength where there should have been none. And for the first time in her life, she realized the truth. Her worth had never been in being chosen, not by the court, not by the alphas, not even by the king. Her strength was in surviving, in rising when the world tried to destroy her. She pushed herself to her knees, fire burning in her chest. "You think I'm weak," she whispered, her voice trembling but growing stronger. "You think I'm nothing, but I am still here. I am still breathing, and I will not break for you." Her defiance lit the air. The assassins sneered, tightening their grip on their blades. One raised his sword high, ready to end her, and just as steel began its deadly arc, the night split open with a roar. Low, ferocious, unstoppable, the sound of a king who had come for what was his. The roar shattered the night. It was not the cry of a man, it was the primal bellow of a beast, a sound that carried fury, power, and an ancient promise. The assassins froze, blades trembling in their hands as the forest itself seemed to cower. From the shadows emerged the Alpha King. His golden eyes blazed like molten fire, his presence swallowing the clearing. His wolf aura pressed against every soul, forcing the intruders to their knees. But he did not come alone. Behind him, warriors of his pack burst through the trees, snarling, their fangs bared. The ground trembled beneath the might of their charge, yet the girl, the rejected Omega, did not run into his arms. She stood, bloodied, trembling, her palms still scraped from the earth. She rose to her feet. The assassin's laughter still echoed in her mind, the years of mockery still burned on her skin, but her heart was steel. The king's gaze locked onto her. For the briefest moment, fury softened into fear, not fear for himself, but for her. His bond ached, calling her to his side, but before he could step forward, she lifted her chin and spoke, her voice carrying across the clearing. "No more hiding, no more chains, no more shame." The warriors stilled. Even the king froze, his chest heaving. She turned, facing the assassins who had tried to break her, and then the shadows beyond them, where other eyes now watched, courtiers, nobles, rivals, who had followed the scent of scandal and blood. They wanted to see her fall. Instead, they would see her rise. "I was the girl you mocked at the auction, the one you spat on, the one no one wanted." Her voice did not waver, though her body trembled. "But tonight, you will remember me as the queen who did not bow." The air thickened with her words. The mark on her skin blazed with sudden light, flaring brighter than ever before. Gasps rippled through the crowd as the bond between her and the king surged like wildfire, a visible force wrapping her in brilliance. But this time, she did not shrink from it. She claimed it. The assassins lunged again, desperate to silence her. But the king was there in a blur of motion. His wolf form erupted, towering, magnificent and merciless. With claws and fangs, he tore through them, his rage a storm that no man could withstand. Blood stained the earth. Bones cracked beneath his fury. The Alpha King was a beast of legend, and tonight he left no doubt of it. But it was not his slaughter the world would remember. It was her courage. When the last assassin fell, the forest clearing was deathly silent. The surviving courtiers and nobles stared, their faces pale, their lips trembling. The king shifted back, his chest slick with sweat and blood, his eyes wild and burning. And then she stepped forward, not to kneel, not to cower, but to stand beside him. Her hand slipped into his, her fingers threading with his own. His golden eyes widened, surprise flashing across his face as her grip tightened. She was no longer the fragile girl who had been paraded like cattle at an auction. She was fire, she was fury, she was queen. She lifted her chin, her gaze sweeping the gathered pack. "You laughed at me, you called me worthless, but look at me now, look at your Luna, look at the crown that destiny has set upon my head." Her words cracked like thunder, echoing through every ear, branding every heart. The silence broke, first with whispers, then with a rising chorus. Some cried out in rage, others in awe, but none could deny the truth. The rejected Omega had become their queen. The king's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, pride and something deeper flickering in his eyes. And for the first time, he did not stand in front of her to shield her. He stood beside her, their hands entwined, equals in fire and fate. The court would never be the same. The kingdom would never be the same. And the last image burned into history was this: her hand entwined with the king's, her eyes ablaze with power. Not the girl no one wanted, but the woman destiny demanded.